Now that we've set up our wheel and we're ready to throw, the first step in throwing is centering. So what I did first is I got my ball of clay, which is about 1.5 pounds, and when I cut it off the larger tube of clay, I just made it into a ball so that it's a little bit easier. It takes out some of the crazy wobbling that you would get otherwise. So I made it into a ball, and I'm going to put it into the center of my wheel, but I don't just want to place it down. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take it, I'm going to roll it around here a little bit, because we want a little bit of moisture on our bat. With a little bit of moisture on the bat, it helps the clay stick. If the bat's too dry and we put our clay down, it's not necessarily going to stick real well the first time. And if there's standing water on our bat and we put the clay down, the clay will just slide right off. So we want it just slightly damp, just wet from the clay. So I'm going to roll the clay around it so that it gets the bat damp, and then I'm going to take my clay, and in the center I'm just going to place it down a little forcefully. I don't need to slam it down, I'm just taking it and I'm placing it down so that it's on there, and it's not quite stuck, but it's pretty close. Okay, so we're pretty close to center. That's where I want my clay. The next thing I need to do is I need to seal my clay to my bat. So using the finger on my right hand, I'm going to turn my wheel on, and I'm just going to press into the side of the clay until it seals itself with the bat. And it doesn't need to be centered right now, it just needs to be connected to the bat right here. Okay? And now we're ready to get in position to start throwing. So the first thing we need to understand with throwing is that it's not about arm strength, it's all about leverage. So I want to make sure my body is the anchor point for making sure my arms and stuff don't move. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get as close to the wheel as possible, because I want to make a compact position so that I can control the clay. The next thing I'm going to do is my left hand, I'm going to anchor my elbow into my waist or my hip, and then I want to make sure there's a line from my elbow down through my wrist through the center of the clay. And I'm going to touch the clay with this part of my hand, because this part of my hand is the strongest, and if the clay is pushing against it and I push here, it's not going to go anywhere as long as my elbow is anchored. The other thing I need to do is my right hand, I'm going to anchor that elbow in to my hip as well. I'm going to keep this hand stiff, and I'm going to contact the clay through the center again with this part of my hand. Okay? That will control the height of my clay, where this will control the width of my clay. So when I first start, I want to make sure my hands are wet and I've got water on my clay. I'm going to anchor this in, anchor this elbow in. I'm going to turn my wheel on as fast as it goes. And then the first thing I'm going to do is put my arm here, and I'm going to press down. And what that's going to do is it's going to widen out my clay and push it into this hand. As soon as you feel the clay start to pull against your hands a little bit, you need to add a little bit more water so that the clay should move smoothly through your hands at all times. So as I'm doing this, you'll notice there's a wobble to the clay. To get rid of that, I need to work my clay back and forth. So the next thing I'm going to do is, now that it's really stuck to my wheel, I'm going to take this, I'm going to raise this hand a little bit, and I'm going to lean in with this hand, and you'll notice my clay gets taller until it meets the hand that I lifted up. Then I'm going to press back down. I'm going to do that back and forth a couple of times until my clay moves smoothly through both hands without any wobble. Anytime I take my hands off the clay, I want to ease the pressure off so that the clay doesn't rebound. If I apply too much pressure to the clay and then quickly pull my hands off, the clay is going to push back really fast. So anytime I put my hands onto the clay or take them off, I just want to ease the pressure on and then ease the pressure off. Okay? To check to see if your clay is centered, you can take your right hand and push it against the side here, and just lightly touch it. And if my hand wobbles back and forth a little bit, then my clay is not centered. The clay should move smoothly through without pushing my hand out at all. So I have a little wobble at the bottom that I need to take care of. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to do the same thing. Raise it up, then push it back down. Okay? And once your clay is centered, then you're ready to start throwing. This is the shape that I want to achieve. I want it slightly wider at the bottom than it is on top, and then the top should come to a little bit of a point in the middle. It shouldn't go back in. It should always come up in the middle at the top. Okay, so that's the shape that we're gonna start working with when we start throwing.